Now, talking about preparing, I don't fear climate change or man-made global warming. What I do fear is another meteor like the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. I look at what destroyed the previous dominant species. That's what I worry about. Like if, everybody in my family died of cancer, I would be very concerned about cancer. If it was heart disease, it'd be heart disease. I know that the previous dominant species was wiped out by a meteor. That
Hmm.
concerns me. Is there
Yeah.
anybody doing any research or spending any money thinking about how the human species would survive another meteor strike? Where would our water come from? So you've got a certain amount of food in Walmart that you could raid, assuming you survive. But 5 years from now, what am I going to eat? What can I feed in that environment? What's that environment look like? What grows in that environment, and where would I get clean water for myself and for that plant? And are there any plants that you can feed battery acid to in the dark, in a cool climate, and get a safe, edible food out of now? Because that's probably what you're going to get 6 months after the meteor hits.
Yeah, there's a paper you should look at. It's called Astronomical Odds. It's written and it was done as a PhD thesis, looking at the impact. How would you prepare for asteroid impact? And it's done by the Rand Corporation. They're the ones who founded or funded it, I believe, but it's a PhD thesis. And it talks about the different stages in preparing for asteroid impact. And the first stage is detection. You have to see it. You have to know it's coming. And that's something that the last I looked, we're not doing very well on that. We have a fair bit of detection telescopes, automatic tracking in the northern hemisphere, but virtually nothing from what I last saw in the southern hemisphere. So we could be hit from the south and not see it until very late. But they talk about different levels of preparation. First of all, detection, and then you have to characterize, is this a big hunk of iron or is this a loose, fluffy snowball that's just going to break up in the atmosphere? And then you have to plan for, okay, now what are we going to do about this? Are we going to try and move it, as they did in that Armageddon movie, which is quite exciting? Or are we just going to engage in civil response and basically try and tough it out? So I don't really think we've done enough in that area. For sure, the detection part has to be improved. And I think you're right. My original career was aerospace engineering, so I used to talk a lot about the space program. One of the primary reasons why we want to have an interplanetary species is so that we're not all just here. Because if you look at history, species that all stayed in one valley, if they had a big flood or an earthquake, that could be it for the species. If we all stay here and we don't expand outward and settle the high frontier, as they call it, we're pretty vulnerable, not just to asteroid impact, but also to things like worldwide plague or nuclear war or various things. So I think this is actually a strong reason why we want to have a space program, not just because it could help us actually deflect an asteroid if we detect it far enough out, but also because if the Earth is creamed by an asteroid, we want to have help from people who were not hurt. And so in that sense, you want to have self-sufficient off-world presence on the moon, on Mars, and perhaps even further out in the Lagrangian points, out in space. And that, I think, is a good argument for expanding humans beyond this little eco niche, like we're pretty vulnerable right here.